So our next question is, what is event loop and how it works in Node.js? I would say this is very, very important, and this is the heart of the Node.js. And this question is going to be asked by the interviewer certainly somehow. And your interview is not getting completed without this question for sure, right? So now let's understand that what event loop is and how it works. So before understanding the event loop, first of all, see what we have in our JavaScript, right? So we have our JavaScript code, and in that JavaScript code, we have our main function, right? Where we are going to start our main thread, and inside that function, inside that application, we have some kind of synchronous function and asynchronous functions, right? So if we have synchronous functions, that is going to be executed immediately, but in case of if we have asynchronous functions like callback and promises, then how they are going to be handled, right? So we will understand all those things step by step. So here we have our JavaScript code. As soon as our JavaScript code is getting executed with the help of V8 engine, then the very first thing comes into the picture, which is call stack, right? The functionality of this call stack, it took the function step by step, register over here, and then execute them. Okay, so the very first time our main function will come over here, right? So here our main thread is getting started, right? And once main thread is getting started, then our next function, next block will come over here, that is the synchronous function. And if this is a synchronous function, this is going to be executed immediately. Okay, so it's going to execute it immediately, and our next block will come, and next block is asynchronous function, which is a type of callback, right? And whenever we are having the asynchronous function, in that case it's going to be handled in a different way. They are going to assign to a API, right? So in the Node.js, in the backend side, we have some sort of APIs, and as soon as this function is getting assigned to the API, there is a library in Node.js that is known as a libuv, that is written in C++, right? It's very, very important library, and because it is managing these asynchronous operations, right? And this library is having number of idle threads inside a thread pool, right? So it assign a thread to this function, and then this function is going to be assigned to the APIs, right? So now if you see here, this function, this async function assigned with the thread, and then it going to be assigned to the API, respective API, right? So we have several kind of APIs like fetch API, timer API, console API, geolocation API, web storage API, file API, network API, DB API. So these kind of APIs are there that is being handled by libuv library, right? So these function is going to be assigned to the specific API, and simultaneously sync function 3 block come into the call stack, and immediately it's getting executed, right? And this async function came for the execution into the respective API, right? And it's getting started executing over here. Now our fourth block of function come into the call stack, and this is also async, so it will go to the API, right? So once it will come to the API, then suppose that here I'm going to have this async function inside the timer API, right? So but before that, what happened? See here, our main function, this is our main thread, right? And this main thread is getting completed. So our main thread is getting completed, but still our asynchronous functions are getting executed, right? Inside our Node.js libuv. So now suppose that this async function is getting assigned to the timer API. Once these functions are executed, right? They are completed, then they have the events, right? So the result needs to be reverted back with the help of event. So now once they are completed, now our event loop come into the picture, right? So event loop is nothing. This event loop is having, we have two kind of task queue. One is task queue, that is known as a macro task. Another one is micro task queue. Okay. So whenever I'm talking about a callback function, always callback functions event are getting registered inside task queue, right? And promise is getting registered inside the micro task queue. That we are going to detail differences in our upcoming videos, but here just understand that callback functions events are getting registered in task queue, and promise functions event are getting registered in micro task queue, right? So now if you see here, see, our callback came into the task queue, macro task, and promise come to the micro task queue. Now what will happen here in the event loop? Event loop always try to check our task queue and micro task queue, right? So as of now, we are having two tasks, right? One is function 2 and function 4. So which one will go into the call stack first? always we are having the priority to the micro task queue, right? So if anything is there in the micro task queue, it will go first. This is a very, very important question. Most of the time interviewer are asking and they are trying to make you confuse in difference between the task queue and micro task queue. So always micro task queue is having a priority and the event will go first to the call stack. So see here, now it's our promise went to the call stack and it's getting executed here and it's gone, right? Again event loop run, and event loop will check do we have anything inside the micro task queue or not. If we don't have anything inside the micro task queue, then after that this function 2, async function 2 will go back to the call stack and getting executed and went out from there, right? So this is all things is happening inside the event loop at the background of node.js execution, right? So now the important thing is to understand we have our JavaScript code, and that JavaScript code is getting executed on top of V8 engine, and inside this engine we have our call stack. So all the functions block are getting registered inside the call stack, and if they are synchronous functions, they are getting executed immediately. But if they are asynchronous functions, those async functions are getting assigned to the APIs, and APIs getting called by using libuv library, and they are getting assigned a thread to that particular task and they are getting executed. And if they are specific to a callback function, then it's going to be assigned to the task queue, and if they are promise, then they are going to assign to the micro task queue, right? And micro task queue is always having a priority than task queue, and event loop always check their task queue and micro task queue, right? So this is what happening inside the background. So whenever interviewer is asking about event loop, so it's not just about the event loop. You have to explain about call stack, APIs, type of APIs, libuv libraries, worker thread. These threads are nothing. These are known as a worker thread, right? About the thread pool, about the task queue, micro task queue, V8 engine, right? So you have to explain everything. So interviewer will understand that yes, you have a very depth knowledge in Node.js, right? Now let's see some actual asynchronous code and how they execute and what are their execution order, right? So here you see, here I have all the type of asynchronous functions, and we have also some synchronous functions as well, right? So our main thread will start from here, and the first line will be executed as a start of the script, right? This is a synchronous function, so it will be getting executed immediately. The next line of code is also a synchronous function, so again it will come to the call stack and it will execute it immediately, right? But if you see here, the set timeout, set interval, and set immediate, these all are the asynchronous functions type of callback. So these are going to be executed inside our API. They will come to the call directly. They will go to the API, and similarly, and set immediate also will come to the call stack and it will go to the API. So here for this set timeout 3, and I'll mark it a line number 1, and I'll mark this as a line number 2, right? And this is also our callback function. So it will go to the API and it will be executed. So here I'll mark it as a block number 4. Again here set immediate, this is again a callback function. It will go to the API. So here I'll mark it as a block number 5. Okay. Now promise will come, right? So promise also a asynchronous function. So this will go to the API and it will be executed there, but it will go to the micro task queue, right? So I'll mark it as a block number 6. Okay. And then this read file is a callback function. So this is also asynchronous function, so I'll mark it as a block number 7. Okay. Now this process.nextTick I told you that this would be considered as a promise, but it is having priority than promise, right? So I'll mark it as a promise. This is my promise, and I'll mark it as a block number 8. Now we have again our asynchronous code, which is console.log. So this will be executed. I'll mark it as a line number 9. Okay, this would be 9. So what would be their order of execution? Their order of execution will be, first of all, our main thread will start and our block number 1, right? Simple console.log will execute, right? And then after that, this synchronous code will execute, second number. And then after that, I told you main thread is not going to wait for any asynchronous functions, right? So eventually it's going to execute it, the 9th one. right? And here our main thread is finished, right? Now we have only asynchronous functions which are going to be executed inside our APIs, right? So how they will execute? So these 3 4 5 will come in the API, they will execute and they will come to the task queue here. 3 4 and 5, right? And here 6 is a promise, so it will execute through the API and it will come to the micro task queue as a 6, right? Then again we have a callback function, right? Read file, then it will go to the task queue. Because it's a callback, it will go to the task queue. After that we have process.nextTick. I told you that process.nextTick is always having a priority than promise, so it will come before our promise inside our micro task queue, right? And now our event loop is running, right? So our event loop first will check the micro task queue. It will find 8 and 6, right? So our next execution will be 8 and then 6, right? And after that, once all the events are finished from micro task queue, then it will execute from the task queue, right? So now 3 4 5 7 will be executed. So here 3 4 5 and 7 will be executed. So this will be the order of execution. Now let's run the same piece of code in our Visual Studio Code and see if they are executing in the same order, right? So let's flip to the Visual Studio. So here I have written the same piece of code. Now I'm going to execute this. And don't worry if you don't know how to set up our Node.js application. That we are going to do in our upcoming session, where we are going to set up our entire Node.js application. But for now, I'm just trying to demonstrate you how our different type of asynchronous functions are executing inside our node environment, right? So now let me run this. In order to run, we have to write our command as a node, then file name. This file name is eventloop.js, right? So file name is wrong over here, right? So this will be event loop, right? Now see, here we have the execution. Now if you see, the very first line executed at the very first start of the script here, the second line executed as a synchronous code, this one, and the third line executed as a 9, which we have given end of script, right? See, this was our 9, so this is executed at third. Then our process.nextTick, I told you process.nextTick and promise are going to pick from micro task queue, right? And process.nextTick is having priority, so it's going to be executed first. Then after that our promise, and after that our all the callback will be executed from our task queue. So this is set timeout, and after that set intervals, set immediate, and eventually we are having our read file callback. So this is how they are going to execute asynchronous functions inside our Node.js environment. I hope this is getting clear to you, but still you have any doubt, please leave me in the comment section and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. Now further move and let's see what is the difference between set immediate and process.nextTick functions, and what all the differences between task queue and micro task queue.